Welcome back to the Off the Ball podcast. I'm your host, Clay Tillman, and on today's episode, we're going to be breaking down the Bengals versus Chargers game from last night, and also we're going to be previewing the Texans versus Cowboys game for Monday Night Football. Let's begin, as always, with Sunday Night Football and talk about the Chargers and the Bengals game. So Chargers end up winning in a battle in the second half, 34-27 against a struggling defensive Bengals team who was poor, looked very poor performance-wise in the first half, turned it up in the second half offensively and defensively, but couldn't get it done because of the deficit they had in the first half. They were down 24-6. Bengals were against the Chargers, 24-6 in the first half, and they just couldn't recover. They tried their best by tying it in the second half towards the end, 27-27, but couldn't get it done. And we're going to explain why. And I want to start off with the Bengals, and let's go through the box score. Joe Burrow had a fantastic game. He's been playing at such an exceptional rate where he is a legitimate MVP candidate. The reason I don't put him at number one for MVP is because of how bad his team has been. And it hasn't been his fault. It really hasn't. Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, their chemistry together is one of the best chemistry duos, quarterback to wide receiver, in the whole league. It is very impressive and fun to watch, especially last night. T. Higgins had a good game, but Joe Burrow, man, he can get it done. It's just their defense can't keep up. They can't get it done, and it's been a ugly season for this Bengals team. It's been very frustrating. If I was a Bengals fan, I'd be very frustrated. You have a top 5 offense in the league, and you have a very poor defense. That is the main reason, 100% of the reason, why your team is unsuccessful so far through week 11. It's blatantly thrown out there that the reason they've sucked is because of their defense. Their offense has been a bullet train. Nonstop. Explosive plays, especially in the second half against the Chargers. But there's no consistency on the defensive side. I mean, they played well in the second half. But in the first half, it was a ghost town on the secondary. And it's just been a problem all year. I mean, Joe Burrow, again, he had a fantastic game. Threw 28 for 50 on 356 yards and 3 touchdowns. 2 of them to Jamar Chase, who had 7 receptions on 75 yards. And 1 of them to T. Higgins, who had a fantastic game. 9 receptions on 148 yards. And now we get to the ultimate side of the things, and we look forward into the future. We have 6 weeks remaining in the NFL. 6 weeks. And I put a humongous question mark in front of playoffs when I think of the Bengals. Because they're 4-7 after this loss. So they'd have to win a minimum. They can only get up to 10 wins this season. They're going to have to win out. That's all I'm going to have to say. There's not a floor, there's not a ceiling. They're going to have to win out. Because of the other wild cards in the AFC. You have the Chargers, who are a big statement to get that wild card spot. Right now, they're ranked number 7 in the AFC. And then you got the Dolphins, who are heading into a positive direction with Tua coming back. So it's hard to say that this Bengals team has a slight chance of even making the playoffs because they have to win out. And earlier this year, Joe Burrow said 10 wins is enough to get in the playoffs. Well, now you're going to have to win out. So it's going to be almost impossible because let's look at their schedule. Steelers twice. They haven't played the Steelers yet, who have just come off their 4th win in a row with Russell Wilson. They play one game in their home stadium, and then they go to Pittsburgh, which will be brutal, in my opinion. They play the Cowboys, which I think the Bengals will win that game just because how much the Cowboys have struggled this season. You got the Titans, that's an easy win. You got the Browns, that's an easy win. You got the Broncos. This Broncos team has been very surprising this season. One, you have You have Bo Nix as your QB, who has been phenomenal so far this season. He has been an underrated rookie quarterback and quarterback in general. He can run, he can pass. His stats are incredible. He's had multiple touchdown games with 0 turnovers. He just destroyed the Falcons, throwing 4 touchdowns. And we've seen this multiple times. He's had 3 touchdown games multiple times with 0 interceptions, 2 touchdown games with 0 turnovers. It's been a phenomenal job from Bo Nix. And it wouldn't have been if they didn't get rid of Russell Wilson. And they did. And look what happened. Bo Nix is very familiar, has looked very familiar so far. And you have a great coach in Sean Payton, who's a future Hall of Famer. So the remainder of the schedule is difficult. You have the Cowboys, you have the Titans, you have the Browns. Should be some easy wins. The Cowboys is probably the hardest game out of those 3. You got the Steelers times 2. Good luck against them. They've been on a roll with their defense and TJ Watt, who's a potential defensive player of the year candidate, could be the winner. And then you have the Broncos, who are on a steamroll to potentially be a wild card. So it's going to be very, very difficult for this Bengals team, who's 4-7, who's struggled significantly on the defensive side, to win. And I think the reason they won't get in is because of their division as well. Their division's tough in general. You have the Ravens, who are probably going to win that division. They just lost to the Steelers on Sunday, but they're still an offensive beast team. They're still a powerhouse. They're going to win that division. But you also have the Steelers. Don't forget about them. Steelers rank defensively. Their defense is unbelievable. Defensively, they ranked 8th in total defense, averaging 15 touchdowns per game. In total. They've only allowed 15 touchdowns this whole season. They're 4th in rush defense, averaging a little over 67 yards per game. They're 2nd in score defense, averaging 16 points per game, or allowing 16 points per game. They're 3rd in red zone percentage, only averaging a little over 44% conversion rate in the red zone. So phenomenal defense by them, and TJ Watt is is the one on the horse leading them to be a successful 8-2 team. So it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be difficult. It's not going to be easy. You're going to have to win out. And it's most likely not possible. Now we're looking at the offseason. Who are we going to fire? Who are we going to sign? Obviously, Jamar Chase is going to get a bag. Then it's talks of like, are we going to re-sign T. Higgins? T. Higgins deserves that wide receiver 1 position, so I don't believe they do re-sign him. I think T. Higgins should go to a team that really needs a wide receiver 1. And they need to work on their defense. It's just been a mess this season, and it's been very disappointing because of how bad their defense to offensive ratio has been. Some of the biggest holes I saw, especially in last night's game, was the pass defense from the Bengals. One positive note that I saw was completely all of the second half. In total, Herbert they kept Herbert to only throwing 47%, but Herbert had 4 20-plus yard completions through the air on 2 touchdowns. So that's one thing I saw that I would say the biggest hole in the game was just their pass defense and how short of a pass defense and run they had in the first half. In the second half, they turned up, but in the first half, they were just slow and they couldn't keep up. I mean, Justin Herbert was fantastic in the first half. He had 2 touchdowns that were phenomenal, great passes, and the Bengals pass defense just looked shell-shocked. So it's been heartbreaking. It's definitely been heartbreaking. Especially last night's game. I mean, it was 6-24 at half. And this Bengals team, who struggled defensively all season long, could have had the greatest comeback in team history. I mean, they tied it 27-27 in the fourth quarter. And it came down to one last drive when J.K. Dobbins had a phenomenal run into the end zone. So it was just heartbreaking. Whole season, it's been heartbreaking. And if I had to explain, or if I had to describe the Bengals in one word, it would be heartbreaking. And I'm going to leave it to that. Let's move on to the Chargers, who have been ultimately an underrated team this season. Hasn't been a lot of talk about them. I think Justin Herbert has been great. Jim Harbaugh has been a great coach for them as well, and they are a bright team. I won't be surprised if we see this team make a deep playoff run this season. They're going to have to fix some stuff once it comes closer to the postseason. But if it's not this season, in the next few seasons, Jim Harbaugh just came off winning a national champ with Michigan. He's experienced. He's a great coach. And you're coaching under a great quarterback in Justin Herbert. They don't have a phenomenal offense, not the most exciting offense, but they're clean and they're very efficient. I like their team. I love their rookie, Ladd McConkey. I think he had a fantastic game. He's their future wide receiver. He's the most reliable guy for their team. But then you have guys like Quentin Johnston, who did really well. Their run game and J.K. Dobbins, who's had a fantastic season. But Justin Herbert last night was 17 for 36 on 297 yards and 2 touchdowns. A lot of that came from the first half, those 2 tutties, and the completion rating. In the second half, it went down a lot. But J.K. Dobbins had a good game, 11 carries on 56 yards with 2 touchdowns. His last touchdown sealed the game for them. He played phenomenal. That was a great run from him. If y'all didn't see that, he was able to get in the nick of time. So it was a great run from him, and he's been phenomenal all season. So far, as of week 11, he's not a top 5 running back in my opinion, but through the first 5-6 weeks, he was dominant. He was playing very, very well. I think he's still a top 10 running back this season, but He's just been very solid for them. And a great running back for this Chargers team. But also, Will Dissly had a good game. 4 receptions on 80 yards, 1 touchdown. He had a great touchdown pass early in the first quarter. I believe it was the Chargers, possibly their first drive of the game, but the pass from Justin Herbert to Dissly was just beautiful. And this young team, man, like I said, bright future ahead of them. Quentin Johnston as well. 2 receptions, 48 yards, 1 touchdown. But a bright future for them. Jim Harbaugh is going to be their coach for a while. I mean, Justin Herbert will be their quarterback for a while. I think he should stay there for as long as he desires, because they're on the uprising. And I'm glad Justin Herbert is their QB because he's entertaining. I watched them last night for probably the first time this year, and they just look like a fun team to watch. They don't have Keenan Allen anymore, which is disappointing, but they are rebuilding, and they're looking great. They're looking really, really good. Their defense isn't bad at all. I mean, it isn't the best, but they aren't bad. So a bright future from them. We're going to see a lot more from them in the future. I can promise you that. But here are some concerns that I have. When it comes playoff time, these are the concerns I have for the Chargers. One, it's just poor defense in the second half. And they really relied. They won because of the Bengals missed field goals from Evan McPherson. Is that his name? Evan McPherson. I believe that's the kicker's name. If I'm messing that up, I apologize. But McPherson, I'm about to look that up because that's going to drive me nuts. I could have gotten that wrong. Bengals kicker. Yes, Evan McPherson. I'm so glad I got that right because that would have been bad on my part. But he had 2 missed field goals, which screwed them badly. And then they relied on Dobbins' late touchdown. I mean, that's not bad stuff. It's clutch. It shows how clutch this Chargers team can potentially be. But once it comes playoff time, they don't look sustainable. In the second half, the Bengals had a lot of explosive plays. One play at the beginning of the second half where T. Higgins was wide for a bomb of a touchdown, and it was explosive on the Bengals, and it was positive for the Bengals. But now I look into the future, and I see, hey, this Chargers team that could potentially make a big playoff run. You're gonna have to be consistent in both halves. It isn't a one-half show. It's not like the regular season where you're going to be playing teams like the Bengals who have been terrible defensively. You're not going to play bad defensive, offensive teams. You're going to play teams who are hungry for a Super Bowl. You get into the playoffs and your record is 0-0. Anyone can make the Super Bowl. Anyone can play their hardest. It comes down to a mindset, and it comes down, can we play at a consistent rate starting in the first quarter and ending in the fourth quarter, no matter the time, no matter the score. So the fact that they almost blew a 27-6 lead, a lot of concerns are flashing in my head, man. Is this team sustainable? Can they sustain a lead in the postseason if they have it? Especially against teams like the Texans and the AFC. Texans, who, as of right now, they'll play first round in the wild card game, who is great offensively. Has a great pass has been it's been very unfortunate for the Texans. I'll talk about them in the preview, but it's been very unfortunate for how many receivers they've missed, and Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs being out for the season, and Tank Dell. The run game is now on the uprising, but their defense is good. So like, you're playing up against a Texans team who I think is better. I don't know about better QB. It's almost similar, but better wide receivers. Close. The run game is almost similar for both teams. But despite all of the stats and the players, for a team who isn't experienced in the playoffs, going up against the Texans, who isn't either, so it will be an interesting game. But if they get past the Texans, they're most likely going to play a team who's well experienced on both sides of the ball. So, for a Chargers team that potentially wants to make a run, you're going to have to be consistent on both sides of the ball. All quarters, every half. Consistency. Points matter. Points do matter in the postseason. So that's the concerns I have. Just the way they played in the second half and the inconsistency they had is what concerns me for a potential run in the playoffs, which I would love to see happen. I would love to see this Chargers team potentially make a Super Bowl. Maybe not this season. It'd be cool if they did. I don't want them to make the Super Bowl. I think there's better teams that I would find more entertaining. But in the near future, I think this team has a very good chance of being a legitimate Super Bowl contender. And then I wanted to talk about, I just mentioned him, but Ladd McConkey had a fantastic game. Had no touchdowns, but 6 receptions on 123 yards receiving. And I said he's their future. He's the most reliable wide receiver for them. He's great. He's done great things as a rookie. And I will not be surprised if he will do great things for the next 5 years for them. I mean, I think he'll be a star. He's been great so far. He's teamed up with Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh. So overall, offense is looking great for this Chargers team. Have some concerns for the defense. We'll just see. We'll see how the postseason goes. We'll see if they even make the postseason. There's a lot of time left. 6 more weeks is a big, big difference. But that's the end of the breakdown of the Chargers versus Bengals game. Let's move on to the game tonight. And this team combined hasn't won in 6 games. Cowboys on a 4-game losing streak, and the Texans are on a 4-game losing streak. Let's start off with the Cowboys offense and really hit on their positions and the ratings of their offense. They are this Cowboys team has been devastating. They've been on the lower end of almost every stat on the offensive side and the defensive side. It's almost disgusting to look at. As a fan of the NFL, who's been a fan for a while, Cowboys, America's team, them boys. This season, it's been troubling. I'm not even a Cowboys fan. I don't like the Cowboys. I prefer them to lose, but it hasn't been the Cowboys that I've seen for a decade now. Here's some stats to prove my point. Offensively, they've been atrocious. They've only averaged a little over 19.5 points per game this season. They're 23rd in the league. On third downs, they're 22nd. Against the Eagles in Week 10 last week, they only put up 6 points. They were 3 for 14 on third down. Horrible horrible efficiency, and it's honestly mind-blowing. I know Dak is out. The run game has been iffy. Rico Dowdle, who has had back-to-back games with 50-plus yards, is honestly the only positive for them. CeeDee Lamb, 10 targets, 6 receptions, 21 yards against the Eagles. And the pass offense versus the Eagles was also terrible. 66 yards on the pass offense, an interception, 2.3 yards per average, and a little over 49 QBR. It's unbelievable. Cowboys, what is going on? I have a solution, and it's coaching. Mike McCarthy, get rid of him. He has been atrocious. Dak Prescott, we haven't seen any playoff life at all from this Cowboys team. CeeDee Lamb is wasting his prime here. I love Dak Prescott. I think he's a good quarterback. Run game has been very bad this season, other than the last 2 games from Rico Dowdle. You brought back Ezekiel Elliott for what? For publicity? He's been atrocious. He's way out of his prime. He's overweight. He's unathletic this time of year. He's not good. Their O-line has been very bad, and their defense has been even worse. Well, let's move into the defense. They're 31st. Get this. 31st in points per game allowed. 29 points per game allowed. They are last in red zone coverage. 32nd place. In week 10, they allowed 34 points against this Eagles team on 4 for 5 in red zone conversions. Eagles scored 4 of their 5 attempts or trips to the red zone. They scored 4 of 5 of the times in the red zone. Let's move on to the pass defense. Jalen Hurts had 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, and 115 QBR. And the Cowboys are 31st in allowing the highest defensive rating. So they're a very balanced team. They are consistently. They're a very balanced team. They're not like the Bengals, where there's one side of the ball, the offense, who's exceptional, and there's one side of the ball, the defense, who's atrocious. You have 2 sides of the ball, offense, defense, who are both bad. In the stats and the rankings prove the whole thing. Where was I? The pass rush. That's one thing that they did well, is their pass rush. Micah Parsons came back. That's another positive side. You've got a great pass rusher in Micah Parsons, who in his first game back had 2 sacks. 5 sacks in total from the Cowboys on 22 pass attempts. So that's a positive for them. They need as much positives as possible because they are on the down low. They are on the whole end of the negative side of the magnet in rankings, in statistics, in the whole NFL. They have been atrocious. They have been one of the worst teams in the NFL. And it's crazy to say that. The Dallas Cowboys, who have been exceptional for years, hasn't won a Super Bowl since the 90s, but have been playoff consistent. Dak just came off being second in MVP voting. CeeDee Lamb, All-Pro, wide receiver. And Zach Martin on their O-line, and Micah Parsons, and Trevon Diggs. It's like, what has happened, man? I mean, you have a talented team. what has happened? The only thought I have is coaching. Like Mike McCarthy, I believe it's all him. I believe it's all him. It's just bad. And Jerry Jones and the owner, I don't think he's been good either. I really don't. In the offseason, I said this in an earlier podcast. In the offseason, I want to see a upgrade in the run game. I think they should go for Ashton Jeanty, however you pronounce it. I think it's Jeanty, but Ashton Jeanty, who very well might win Heisman this season. It's either him or Travis Hunter, in my opinion, but he has been phenomenal for Boise State. They are ranked this season, and a lot of that has to do with what Ashton Jeanty is doing for their squad. So I think he'd be a phenomenal guy. He's athletic, and they need a run game. They need their run game back. Rico Dowdle has been consistent, but he ain't a star. I don't believe he's their permanent guy. You want a young guy. Like, dude, when Ezekiel Elliott was a rookie, he was great. I thought he was going to be phenomenal for years. I thought he was the next D. Henry. But now, Ezekiel Elliott has been atrocious. Rico Dowdle has been a positive note for them, which is honestly a problem. No hate to Dowdle. It's just how talented this Cowboys team is. A guy named Rico Dowdle is there a positive on the offensive side? Like, that shouldn't be the case. That shouldn't be the case. So upgrade run defense, get a new coach. It's just disgusting in Dallas. It's disgusting in Dallas. Because tonight they're facing the Texans, and let's get into them. Let's hop right into them. So Texans on a 2-game losing streak. Injuries have been their nightmare, wide receiver wise, and off in their O-line has been terrible. Get this, C.J. Stroud is the second quarterback in being sacked. He's first in yards lost due to sacks. So his O-line has been very, very bad. In the last 4 games, they've scored under 24 points per game. This season, they average a little under 22.5 points per game. That's 17th in the NFL. Last week against the Lions, C.J. Stroud had a not a great game. I mean, 232 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Actually, not a good game at all. Had a 64 QBR. He's had a sub 65 QBR in back-to-back games, which has been pretty bad. He has been in a hole, I would say, lately. So hopefully in this game against a pass defense or a defense in total who has been bad in allowing points, who's been bad in the red zone, and compared to a offense in C.J. Stroud who can throw the ball, they do have a bad offensive line, so you have to watch out from Micah Parsons. But a team who's better offensively, better defensively, I think they have the edge in this one. But let's continue. Against the Lions, John Mechie had a good game. He had 6 targets, 5 receptions, 74 yards on 1 touchdown. Dalton Schultz, their tight end, 4 targets, 3 receptions, 66 yards. But the leading problem for this offense is how many sacks they've allowed. On 33 pass attempts, they took 4 sacks. They took 4 sacks at offensive line in last week's game against the Lions, who is missing Aiden Hutchinson. And the last three of their 4 games, they've given up 4+ sacks. Very close to meeting up with the Bears and Caleb Williams, who's been sacked the most. And that I think that's a leading cause for why their offense has kind of been in a stagnant lately. And it's one reason why they need to focus more on their run game. And Joe Mixon, who has been a positive for them last week against the Lions, he had 46 yards, 1 touchdown, but also through the air, 44 yards receiving. He's had a touchdown in 5 straight games. So they have been building up on Joe Mixon and their run game, and it's been a positive. It's been a positive side for them offensively. I mean, your quarterback is second in most sacks on the year. So now you got to rely on, am I going to stay in the pocket and hope I don't get sacked? Or am I going to potentially run the ball more? Who the Cowboys last week were terrible when it came to their rush defense. I mean, freaking Saquon Barkley had a heck of a game. So are the Texans going to rely on through the air, which they can? You have to watch out from Micah Parsons, or are you going to rely on your run game in a Cowboys team who has struggled tremendously on that part? So Texans can do either things, and I think in this game they should really focus on the run game. I think they'll pass it. I think they should. Nico Collins, cross our fingers that he will be back. He was close last week to being back against the Lions. Wasn't. So against in this game against the Cowboys, he may be back. And he's been a absolute beast for them this season. Even though he got injured, he was leading the league in receiving yards. So once he's back, he's going to be very reliable. They're wide receiver 1. So we'll have to wait and see about that. Moving on to the Texans defense against Jared Goff last week. They had 5 interceptions, 2 touchdowns. Jared Goff had a 59.7 QBR, and the Texans defense averages a little over 79 QBR, which they are ranked 7th in that area. The rush defense was not so good. They allowed 105 yards on 3.3 yards per carry, a touchdown. But this season, there's 22nd in yards per carry. And they allow a little over 4.5 yards per carry. So Nico Dowdle, we'll see what he can do against this Texans rush defense, who has done bad on the yards per carry stat. We'll see what this Texans offense can do against a struggling Cowboys defense. It should be a game. I think Texans win 24-10. That's my prediction. But so far, here's a little history. Texans met Cowboys, the Battle of Houston, for the first time in 2002. And this was when the Texans first established their team. Oilers move up to the Tennessee Titans, and the Texans build their franchise. But they defeated Dallas in their first game ever, 19-10. But as of now, they've met up 6 times. Dallas has won 4-2, or the record is 4-2. They've won 4 of the 6 games. So it's going to be an interesting game. I think Texans have the edge because better offense, better defense. Usually we see a W in the record book for that. So 24-10 is my prediction. Texans win. But that is the end of the podcast. I hope y'all enjoyed. If y'all did, make sure to follow all my socials. You can find me on TikTok. Just search up Off the Ball with Clay Tillman. I should be the first to pop up. You can also follow me on Instagram. Same tag, Off the Ball with Clay Tillman. That's where I post my reels from the podcast. Also, go subscribe to my YouTube channel, Off the Ball with Clay Tillman. That's where I post a video form of my podcast if y'all want to go check that out. I love y'all. I hope y'all enjoyed the podcast, and I'll see you next time on the Off the Ball podcast. Have a good day.